Hi, my name's Thomas Watson. I'm an artist from the UK based in Montreal. I've been undertaking this VR residency in Sporobole, getting to grips with 3 different programs. The focus at the end was Unity, which is a new domain for me. I produced this VR experience based on a viral video. Normally in my practice I start with existing things and then work from that point. So I found this viral video of a crab with a knife, and I used the frames from each image in the video to make a 3D model using photogrammetry, and 3D model produced a backdrop from which I built up my experience. So I produced a crab which you inhabit as the viewer, the spectator, and you have control over the arms. I intended to reverse the experience of the video. So normally the perspective is the camera on the cell phone filming the crab, so you have the perspective of the human, but I wanted to reverse this so you have the perspective of the crab as well. So that's the focus of the experience. The process of producing the work was very new to me. I've used photogrammetry and some programs before, but as a sculptor I'm more materially based. So working in a kind of more abstract space with a computer program was entirely new and in some ways complete opposite to my regular practice. So that was interesting as a challenge in itself, but I've come to realize there's a few similarities. I guess the VR experience, as I understand it, is something very real. You make it real through your experience, so in some way it's this concreteness of experience, but the elements are very abstract. You're looking at, a moving image. So that was the first thing I kind of tried to get to grips with, and having the added level of immersion using the leap motion sensor, which is an infrared sensor you put on the front of the VR headset, and it tracks your hand movements. So this adds another level of feeling like you're inside the experience. In my regular practice, the kind of focus, I guess, is using objects that exist, and I take them apart to make other objects. That's kind of my artistic process. But the focus of this is very much this idea of rarefication, which has many definitions, but for me rarefication means the act of making the abstract concrete. So in VR this makes sense a lot more, and in sculpture it tends to be the opposite, the act of making the concrete abstract. So I've been playing with these elements, and it took me a while to figure out the relevance of VR to my practice, but then once I had an idea I kind of went for it and quite intensively tried to produce this experience, putting in a lot of hours trying to learn the program and get to grips with it. Luckily we have the expert help of two technician artists through Sporobole, so this was very important, I feel, because just having access to the program and the setup of the VR, I feel would have been an entirely different experience. Like having someone who's very capable with these types of programs was essential, so I'd highly recommend that. I guess the working process was different from what I'm used to. Producing an artwork through computer programs and VR particularly, it's not always productive in a way that working with materials is productive. Say with a sculpture or an object, each process you go through, there is a result. When you're on a computer program, you can spend hours and have nothing to show for it. So that was something I had to kind of get used to. And I think I also realized that the process of working with computer programs, Unity particularly, time management is very, very important. It's very, very easy to get lost in trying to solve one particular problem, and then at the end of it you get lost and you forget the focus of what you're doing. So I ended up having to do things like set my phone timer for every hour to go off, to remind myself to reflect on what I'm trying to do and the grand scheme of things. So that was quite useful, and actually that's one skill I think I've developed further through this residency, like managing my time better, maintaining focus and not getting lost so much. As with producing in a material sense with sculpture, it tends to be, because it's always productive, you can do that. You can get lost in producing in the material, and then there's always a result. So this is the kind of main contrast, I think, and the main thing I've learned. My intentions for the experience were, yes, to have the perspective of the crab and the human and contrast them. I'm interested in how animals use objects, particularly in a different way from human beings. I made another piece called Lies, L-I-E-S, and that is based around a viral video of a pet tortoise and a croc shoe. And so I made a giant croc shoe in reference to this. So using these kind of like video references as object and treating videos like objects is something I've done in my practice before. So it made perfect sense to do this with VR. Yeah, I feel like VR is a very, very new medium, even though its history is, you know, from the 80s or before, and particularly Canada has like a strong claim to the early days in the development of VR. But it's only in the last like 3 years or so that it's become more mainstream and accessible. So currently it's all very experimental, and the leading edge of VR tends to be big companies and film studios, like game companies and film, which as a kind of more individualistic level, artists working with VR as a medium makes it a little bit difficult to get attention and be noticed. And also just having access to the resources of expertise, technicians, the budgets required for these things is astronomical. So, you know, artists at the moment can't really compete with this. But I feel as time goes on, more people will use the programs and access to VR equipment will become easier. You know, more interesting things will happen. And it's nice to be, you know, doing this, having this experience of making a VR work, you know, at this time, and be able to see where it goes. And I think I would like to continue with VR. Now I've had a taster, like an introduction. And I feel it's something I will do alongside my regular practice and see what opportunities come up in the future.